This is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast. I'm Ed Robertson. My guest today is David Cronenwett. David is the owner of Helena Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he's a third-degree black belt under American Jiu-Jitsu legend Rafael Lovato Jr. David started his jiu-jitsu journey in Seattle in 1996, back when finding a place to train was like stumbling upon a secret society. Over the years, he's not only refined his own game, but he's shared this art with hundreds of students in Montana's capital city since opening his academy in 2016. But David's path to jiu-jitsu wasn't exactly a straight shot. He grew up in New Jersey, made his way west to study classical guitar at Cornish College of the Arts in Seattle, right as the grunge scene was taking over, and eventually found himself in Montana, drawn by the wilderness and a deep-rooted need for something more. That something more turned out to be a mix of conservation work, backcountry living, and of course, jiu-jitsu, an art that would come to define much of his life. In this conversation, we go deep into the philosophy of jiu-jitsu, why it grabs certain people like me and won't let go, how it humbles you, how it teaches you to remain calm under pressure, and how it can serve as a vehicle for self-improvement. But beyond that, we explore how jiu-jitsu teaches lessons that stretch far beyond the mats. Lessons about patience, resilience, adaptability, and how to wisely face challenges in life. We also talk about the importance of culture in an academy, how a good training environment can shape people beyond the gym, and how the shared purpose and community of jiu-jitsu has a way of bringing folks together from all walks of life. And for those of you who might be on the fence about trying jiu-jitsu, David has plenty to say about why it's never too late to start and how it can change not just how you move, but how you see the world. So whether you're a seasoned grappler or just curious about what makes this martial art so addictive, there's a lot to learn from this conversation. Hope you enjoy. All right, David, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. I was saying before we started recording that my wife is also appreciative of you taking the time to chat because that means she doesn't have to listen to me blabbing about jiu-jitsu all day long. So
you're very welcome.
Well, I've done all my research and I found all this amazing, cool, interesting stuff that you've been doing over the years. But the one thing I never could figure out is where did you grow up? Where were you born? Where were you raised?
I was born and raised in kind of north central New Jersey. Came out west. I had a desire to live in the West from a very young age. I'm not really sure where that came from, but I just had that calling like a lot of people do and had an appreciation or a desire, I guess, to kind of be around mountains and wild country. And when around that time, I was had a strong interest in music, and I applied to study classical guitar in a small integrated arts school called Cornish College of the Arts in Seattle.
Yeah.
And that's where I ended up going in 1989, right as the on the cusp of the massive sort of music scene unfolding in Seattle and the cultural scene that was coming out of there at the time. So I kind of, in my coming of age years, I guess, in a way, college years was right in the middle of all that. And that's a whole nother story, I guess. But that's so I grew up in New Jersey and studied music in Seattle and ended up in Montana in 1997, and it's been here ever since.
So what took you from Seattle to Montana? Because that is interesting time in thinking about that whole music scene coming up, and I mean that's quite a kind of a historic period. So like, what was the catalyst for you to leave that and head to Montana?
Yeah, well, like I said, when I was growing up, I had this strong desire to connect with nature and stuff like that, and it wasn't really fulfilled adequately when I moved to Seattle, which is obviously a big city. And I put my time in there, and then especially post college, I started to spend a lot of time out in the Cascades. And once I sort of got to the the east side of the Cascades, kind of drier, Ponderosa country and stuff like that, that interested me a lot more and kind of, I don't know, hit me emotionally a lot more. And eventually just kind of kept going east. And um, once I got to Montana, it was a this is the place sort of moment, you know.
Yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
made everything, did everything I could to make that happen, and we yeah ended up in Missoula in '97, and in the years since then, I've lived up well in Missoula, lived up in the Yak Valley off grid, lived in Troy for a bit, lived in where did we go? Let's see, Dillon after that for a few years, and then Shoto for about 8 years. And then I've been in Helena since 2014 full time.
Okay. And if I'm correct, conservation, outdoors, experiential education, the whole deal, that's been a huge part of your career. How was that transition from the music world and the arts world into more of the conservation? How'd you make that switch?
Well, when I finished up music school, I realized even in my senior year that there was really no way I was going to pursue this as a career. I had a performance degree in classical guitar with a minor in composition, and which I wouldn't trade those years for anything. It was amazing experience, met some incredible people, but my heart really just kept pulling towards the outdoors, and um, so that's basically what happened. I kind of had my big city years and immersion in the arts, and this other pull was going on, and so that's really what happened. And once I finally allowed myself to fully jump into that, um, I felt a lot more, kind of grounded, and felt like I was doing what I should be doing.
Backing up a little bit, when you were a kid, was outdoors like a huge part of your life? Outdoors, I mean, was there any martial arts as a kid? Like what kind of activities? What kind?
Yep. So I had a very, very strong interest in that. And I didn't have a lot of outdoor experience, didn't grow up in an outdoorsy family at all. Uh, but fortunately, where I grew up, it was a fairly woodsy kind of suburban area we were relatively close to the Great Swamp National Wildlife Refuge. So that I think it was just sort of, you know, my experience kind of growing up in that landscape that had at least some aspect of wildlife and, you know, that sort of thing. And just, yeah, and maybe there's something to having a genetic predisposition towards,
Yeah, I think there is.
nature and wildness. And anyway, it's always been very strong with me. Like, I can't describe it much beyond that, but definitely a driving feature of my life.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I think there is some sort of kind of genetic thing that we have. And then I've got questions about this, obviously, but I think that there's the same thing for jujitsu because I've just experienced it over the last, a little more than a year. And it is almost like it clicks in a way that the only thing I can think of that's comparable is a love of big mountains. Just kind of like this natural fit. So to jujitsu, I can't believe it took me 7 minutes and 40 seconds to get to jujitsu. But it is what's your first memory of jujitsu? Because mine, I remember when I was a kid, and it was probably like 93, 94. So I graduated high school. I graduated high school in 96. So I remember we went to the video store and got the first UFC ever, and I was so excited because I thought the karate guys were gonna just, absolutely destroy everybody like in the movies. And then you see these really small guys just take people down, and what seemed to me at the time to be very, very, very boring. The boring little guys just whipped everybody's ass. And so like what was the first experience you had seeing jujitsu?
So it was very similar. I mean, I remember I was, somehow a videotape came into my possession. And I was doing some kickboxing in Seattle at that time. I was still in school. And, same thing. I saw these fights, first UFC, nobody knew what it was. just a kind of underground feeling, no holds barred, thing that there was just not a lot of precedent for in the US. And it seemed, I remember watching, Hoist Gracie out there, and it just seemed kind of like magic.
Yeah. Yeah.
That the smaller, unassuming Brazilian guy was able to just dismantle these seemingly ferocious, larger, meaner looking dudes, and like ending up in like chokes and arm locks that I never didn't really understand, but people were, giving up like left and right, tapping out. And I just thought that was fascinating to me. And I think at that time, as somebody who was studying striking, you know, had a real fear, a real primal fear of ending up on the ground and not knowing what to do. And I think that's still, and you should be afraid of that. Like, as you know, having someone bigger and heavier laying on top of you and is a very dominating, scary thing. And so
Hmm.
it wasn't long. Let's see, it's probably about maybe a year-ish after that. So I knew what jiu-jitsu was. I'd, heard about it. It was starting to appear in like the martial arts magazines of the time. And um, one day I remember seeing a flyer. I was living on Capitol Hill in Seattle, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was here. I couldn't believe it, and went in and took a class. This was July 1996, and that was it.
Can you talk about that? So you've been practicing other kinds of martial arts, kickboxing, karate. You were not, you understood what it felt like to have somebody coming at you. You understood what it felt like to be hit. But like, can you describe whether, the first few weeks of that, the kind of wake up call you had?
Yeah, I never grappled as a kid. I never had wrestled. Um, I'm a pretty lean, tall and lean kind of body type, um, and so kind of not really at the time, especially typical person who was interested in grappling, wrestling, jiu-jitsu. And it was really the first few months that were really hard for me. And in those days, it was kind of a rougher environment. Things weren't as well established with kind of positive academy culture, I would say,
Yeah. Yeah.
in the jiu-jitsu scene. It was yeah, very, very Wild West. This was probably the first jiu-jitsu academy in the entire Northwest. So back in those days, we're talking mid 90s now. If you wanted to study jiu-jitsu, it was basically Southern California, maybe New York area, maybe a couple of other spots, but nothing in the Northwest. And so Seattle School of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was a student of Higan Machado, and in those days, like, he was a purple belt, and you know, it was like if you had a colored belt on, you were like Superman. I mean,
Sure.
there was just no understanding of this kind of grappling for self-defense or sport. And uh so it was, yeah, it was very difficult. It was rough. And I trained for, oh, a little over a year. And actually, that's around the time we moved to Montana. And I kept a I would come back and train, go back to Seattle now and again. So I maintained contact with that academy for a while after we moved out to Montana, but it was very difficult to do that, and that school ended up going under, and other, the scene was sort of getting more popular in the major cities, but there was really nothing, or virtually nothing in Montana that was something resembling an established academy. So that is that's what led into me opening what was probably one of the first schools in Montana in 97, 98, somewhere in there, in
Oh,
Missoula.
wow.
It was around that time that I met a mutual friend, Hal Herring,
Yeah. Yeah.
through jiu-jitsu. And he, I believe, had studied down south, and I did meet him originally through the jiu-jitsu world.
Well, yeah, when you and I met at Old Salt, Hal introduced us, and Hal and I, like we had to do on stage thing. We were talking about these serious conservation issues, but that was the on stage part was the only part throughout the entire weekend when we were not talking about jujitsu. Like, I mean, it's just endless. Like, and I was probably 6 months in at that point, and really probably too enthusiastic about it. I'm still weirdly, but like I was still. And when I started talking to you, you had a knowing look in your eye, like, yeah, I've seen this before. But the thing is, it gets a hold of you in this way that I don't understand. And so I'm curious, you've been doing all this stuff. I mean, you've been in the music world, you've done kickboxing, or boxing, kickboxing, karate. What was it about jujitsu? Was it instant, or was it pretty quick that you were like, all right, this is different. I'm all in on this. I'm not gonna, when you moved, it was still in your blood. You still made it happen. So can you talk about that kind of obsession?
I remember thinking when I was training in Seattle that I don't think I can do this anymore. Like this is so painful. It's so, emotionally demoralizing
Oh,
that I just don't know if it's for me. And then one day I remember throwing a submission on somebody. It was a straight arm bar from the guard from the bottom position, arm lock. And that person tapped, and I just was like, oh, that's what it's about. I was much younger. This is a long time ago. Um, and, our conversation will likely lead to other broader, deeper uh, reasons why people train jujitsu. But in those days, I just needed some success. And to get that initial success and build on that, and I was getting it more often, and that kind of saved me. So that I guess initially it was kind of getting into that flow state. The world is very small at that moment. And we're talking about live sparring, right? Rolling.
yes.
And so nothing is in your head, the stress of life, your relationships, like whatever's going on, all that matters is that this person in front of you. and being truly in that moment. And so that flow state where you're just reacting, you're just causing reactions, you're just moving from technique to technique, from position to position. You're dealing with your emotional intensity, the physical intensity, and there's nothing else. You're outside of time. um and so I think people experiencing that for the first time in their lives, in some cases, that's very, they don't know what to do with it. I just need to get more of that. That was amazing
Mm-hmm.
for me. I think that was a big part of it. And then, I have to say again, as a younger man at the time, that uh, the lure of having that power over others, essentially. I was not a big guy. I was, men want to, it's a dominance game with men, and you're always wondering, sizing someone up. If something came down, if they got hands on with somebody, how'd you fare? That's just male psychology in a lot of ways, and that was alluring too. Well, I could handle a much bigger person if I got better at jujitsu, and so those are some of the early reasons I think that it was very attractive to me.
Yeah, the part about the flow state, that may have been one of the first kind of aha moments for me, because I've always chased that, and the only places I've ever found it are in a positive, on a positive side of things, surfing, like when you're actually, and that maybe lasts 5 seconds max. And then the other is when I'm very, very, very scared. And that could be like rock climbing, or I don't know, just something where I'm extremely scared, like legitimately scared. And both of those, when you come out of it, it's like, wow, that was something else. But with jujitsu, when the rolls like a 5 minute round and you're in it the entire time, like it's 5 minutes straight of a true flow state, which is, I mean, it's almost hard to believe, or hard for me to get my head around. But I thought about it this morning. I was training this morning, and I was paying attention. Like, am I really in the flow state here? And I mean, I had enough sense to have that thought, but like, no day to day bullshit thoughts about cell phone bills or whatever. Like it's just, um, So, how much did the other big thing for me that I've found is the kind of the community aspect of it? Of you're doing a very hard thing with other people, and it doesn't like socioeconomic uh, place on the socioeconomic scale means nothing. Can you talk about that, like how you figured that out?
Yeah, that is something that came much later for me. Um, I mean, so just to fill in before I get to that a little bit more, my sort of the jujitsu part of my life was got my blue belt like after a year of training and moved to Montana. There's nowhere to keep training, so I opened a little school, and that just falls apart in about a year. There was just not enough critical mass of people who knew what it was to sustain a business like that. That collapsed. So, and I had no business sense anyway, and probably no uh, business running a business at
Yeah,
the time. And I was like, okay, forget it. I'm just going to give this stuff away. I'm going to teach for free. I'll teach out of the garage. I'll teach out of, whatever, the high school wrestling room. And so losing that little school early on set me on a weird path with it. So I was just, and because of the conservation work I was doing, is moving around the state quite a bit. And every place I landed, I had to rebuild that um, training environment. So wherever I was, even up in the Yak, I had teaching a couple of police officers down in Troy at the high school wrestling room, and so I found ways to keep it going, but it never was a real community. It was just sort of it was too small to even call it that. Like there were guys who you trained with, and that was cool and everything, but to really feel like that sense of community, you need to have a good academy with a good culture, I think, and
sure.
it's established. It's very well structured, and I have that now. It took a long time to get there. Um, I started Helena BJJ in 2016, and we're at about 130-ish students right now. And so the community aspect, there's this element of I've worked with a number of veterans, military veterans who have commented that, after their experience at war or just in the military in general, working in these small groups, um, and that shared suffering, that being in the jujitsu, training jujitsu, kind of mimicked that in some way. And that camaraderie, that like, oh, this sucks, but we're in it together. And even though it's competitive, like in a positive um, academy culture, you're trying to you're using these evolutionary forces to improve everybody, right? You can
Yep.
definitely, people who don't train may not understand that it's not just about who is top dog or the handful of people who are like the killers on the mat. Like that's a real thing, but their job, it's like even more incumbent on them to help everyone else. Like the talented people should bring everybody up, especially. And so, um, and like you said, that the demographic thing, very important. It's like we like many academies, we have people all walks of life, truly, like doctors, lawyers, electricians, everything.
Yep.
And how many places in our world today, which is extremely polarized, and we put ourselves into boxes, we consume the social media and news that only we want to consume and nothing else, and echo chambers. And at the academy, it's like, I mean, people don't like tend to dig into heavy political stuff that often, but it doesn't take long to figure out you're hanging out with somebody who may not agree with you on everything, and that's a good thing.
Yep.
It's like we can still be civil, we can still train hard, we can still joke around, and you know all of that. And there just aren't many avenues for this in our culture anymore. And so part of me, like the jujitsu evangelist part of me, is like this can help kind of save the world, because it's so important for us to see others as flawed human beings just like ourselves.
No, I mean, the thing that I've come across when I'm trying to explain this to people is like, I've noticed when somebody is like super, super excited or almost evangelical about something, it can be very hard for me to like appreciate where they're coming from almost. And I feel like that's how I've gotten talking about jujitsu. And I'll be very clear, like I'm the worst one there. Like in my little group of people, and I have been the entire time, like from the time I started, I've always been, there's nobody new has come in after me. And so it's like, I continue to just get pounded over and it's like there, and there's really nothing I can do about it at this point. I'm getting better, but I'm waiting for a new guy to come in. And
Yeah,
so
dude, and you need that too.
yeah,
Like in the jiu-jitsu ecosystem, it's very important to have new white belts come in so that you can dominate them basically.
yeah,
Because you need that success. And what do I like to expand upon that? Your brain, when you are rolling, sparring with somebody who is a lot better than you, or even a little bit better than you, or equally matched, your brain is often so full of cortisol that it's interpreting your central nervous system as like, I'm gonna die, or I could die, life and death. And it's very difficult to learn new things physically. Your brain has a problem like implementing new learning or learning new things because it's in this total threat mode, right?
yep,
If you're training with somebody who you can clearly dominate, you can be playful. And the
yes,
playful brain is a brain that can learn new things. It's more plastic, more open to experimenting, having fun. We know these things about play in mammals and humans especially. So that's why you need new people coming in, so you can just have fun and try new things and experiment. It's not always a life and death feeling when you're training, and that's where the growth happens. So probably most of our training should be with people. Um, I've done some reading about this. People quite a bit less skilled than us to build up
yeah.
that. To keep it playful. To use a cliche, but not to say that you shouldn't do hard, difficult rounds as well. But it is important to just be playful and like to allow your body to relax and to try stuff.
So I started out at one gym and it kind of imploded as seems to be more normal than I realized at the time. And it was actually it ended up being a good thing because I ended up going to another gym that the culture is just more in line with my personality and the other people. I mean, the other place was great. I didn't know, I didn't have an opinion other than this is cool until I compared it to the new place. But at the new place, I think two things have happened. One, I finally calmed down a bit. I was the prototypical spaz white belt for a really long time. I calmed down, and then I trust all the guys I train with, and we are able to like we'll go hard but then we'll do a lot of just playing around and messing around, and I've committed to going multiple days a week, but only going hard at the most 2 days a week, and that gives me the opportunity just to mess around. And I found that and I've seen that with my daughter. My daughter plays violin, and I've always been happy when I see her just playing around with the violin versus practicing. I feel like that's where the growth happens.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. Um, so you have to. I mean, in a good academy, to me, it's like the culture is everything, right? You could imagine a place that had like great jujitsu, but a terrible training environment where people just are just merciless on each other and like everybody has a big ego, and there are places like that out there. But a healthy culture will encourage healthy competition and also be able to kind of nurture and encourage these more exploratory modes of training at times. There's a time to be really structured. There's a time to go hard. There's a time to, so a skillful, professor, or whoever is running the show should be able to create a place allows for all of that.
Well, that brings me to another question about you building culture, because I was emailing with Hal the other day, and he sent me this long email. I'll share it with you later, but he was talking about how you're the master of creating great culture and how culture changes no matter what. It's always going to be changing as people come and go, as times come, change. But that you've somehow managed to keep this a very productive culture in place that works for you and for the majority of your students. Um, here in Colorado Springs, where I live, is a military town. I mean, there you can walk down the street and find, if you don't like a gym, you can walk down the street and find another one. But I would imagine in Helena, it's not like that. So, like, can you just talk a bit about how you've done that? Because, like, for example, if somebody, a bully rolls in trying to rough everybody up and bringing down the culture, how do you handle that?
We have a lot less of that now. There are a few, I think we have 3 or 4 academies in Helena right now. We are the oldest one. It's kind of good that there are other places because, if something doesn't work for somebody, they can try, at our place or whatever, they can go somewhere else. So, we've have had people move on to other places. They weren't getting what they needed, but our retention is very good overall. We've had people, I have people at the academy who've been here for almost the entire time. So, 9 years. When people, we just don't get a lot of the bullies coming in anymore. It's weird.
Huh.
And I almost feel like it's, because, that has happened. Um, it's almost like they come in and they just don't stay. It's like
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
energy field or something, but I think it's a cultural thing. Like they come in and people are looking for, and often it's just like people who kind of worship power or just like they just want to quote unquote train hard. Yeah, it's a bully mentality. Like we don't have, I don't know, I'm just a big believer in like getting, asking bad apples to leave, right away.
Will you do that? I mean, have you done that in the past? Just said this isn't a fit. You got to go.
Yeah, here and there. And I haven't had to do very much of that. It's not pleasant to do, but sometimes it's necessary. And you can't have bullies in an academy. Now, there's times, also where in my learning how to do this, where I let stuff go way too long. Definitely learned my lesson. So I don't know. I think it's just for me, it's an intuitive thing of trying to, I grew up training jujitsu at a time that was like all about just you want your blue belt? Okay, you're gonna beat all those guys. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Purple belt, you gotta tap all those guys. And some of that's still in me. Like you do need to have a level of being able to grind it out, of toughness, you know, technical skill, all that. But there's also a hell of a lot more to jiu-jitsu than that. And having done it for so long, it started, I was pretty young. I was 26, 55 now. Next year's, my 30-year anniversary. And my personal, like psychological, emotional evolution with all this is it's pretty wild.
The whole thing is so wild to me, and I'm still so new to it. But I think about those Venn diagrams, from high school with the circles, and I think of there three. Like the way I think about it is three circles: is there's the physical, obviously, there's the mental or the intellectual, and then there's like the philosophical. Because I feel like all these lessons that you learn from jujitsu, for example, very basic, but calm down. You're never gonna accomplish anything by being, you know, trying to, be a mod, like I'm just going to lose my mind and I'm going to win. Like whether we're talking about rolling on the mat with other, even with another white belt, or in life, like getting angry about something, there's rarely a time, like, I don't think there's ever a time where you can just lose your mind. Yeah. 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 And so, I mean, I don't know, this is a huge question. You could write a book about it, but like on that, in that philosophy circle, what are some of the big, and I would imagine for you, it's hard to separate now. I mean, you're 30 years in, like it is you, but like, can you think about some of the philosophical kind of bigger picture lessons that you've taken from both being a practitioner and a teacher of jujitsu?
Yeah, well, that's big stuff,
I mean, it's huge. I mean, truly, there hasn't been a book written on that I've seen, and I think there needs to be.
You could say, a basic one like being calm under pressure. It's again, these cliches occur, but if you live long enough and like you do something like jujitsu long enough, you start to understand that these cliches are true. There's a reason they're cliches.
Yes.
So being comfortable with being uncomfortable, or just developing, a stoicism around that. It's one of the hardest things there is. And in jiu-jitsu, it's you've literally got a, you know, physical specimen of a dude, on top of you. Um, and you need to escape that position. There's no better example of that. Like that really does over time, that really will translate into the rest of your life if you consciously, allow it to. So that's one. And calm and self-control, right? Like that self-mastery, which is in many traditions, cross-culturally. Um, I picked up Meditations by Marcus Aurelius again recently, and that, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
It's self-mastery. I read, you know, the Book of Five Rings, last summer. Again, Miyamoto Musashi, 18th century Japan, I guess. Same stuff. You can find this stuff everywhere, but developing yourself into a better person, who can, you know, handle what life will inevitably throw at you is just it's a big part of taking up a practice like this. If you're just in this to kick ass and, like you said, rage at the world or whatever, that is not a good reason to do it. And I guarantee you, you're going to get hurt. You're going to hurt other people, and you may get, it'll break you. Bullies don't survive long evolutionarily.
Yeah.
And now that gets into something else about how we can use jujitsu to deal with our shit. Everybody has it. Everybody has demons. Everybody, has a shadow. Use the Jungian term, that place where we stuff all these bad, dark feelings, memories, experiences that we don't want to deal with, and they tend to come out, about midlife. There's pretty much no way around that if you've been avoiding it. And this is a way to physically get in your body, to be vulnerable. That's another big part of jujitsu and life, is to understand what it means to be truly humble. If you stay in it with, for any length of time and you're serious about it and you allow yourself to, once you get past that initial phase of like, your body is like, what the hell are you doing to me here? you know, and it's interesting talking to guys, I'm in my 50s. We have a number of guys in our 50s at the academy, 40s, starting later in life, and how that presents a different, you're coming in where you're past your physical prime. You have, you're in, or whatever, maybe we're all still in our midlife crisis. Maybe that never ends, but that point in life where you're confronted with your mortality, your successes, failures, unanswered questions, family of origin, all that stuff is in your face. And how that's different than, I think it just kind of makes for a more, for lack of a better term, like a philosophical student, rather than the young, dude who comes in and just wants to, learn some cool shit and kick ass. Like that's okay too. You can do both of those things. But but I prefer the depths. And so now I'm trying to, like, with my younger students especially, teach them how to train, quote unquote, like an old guy, because not only physically where you're more relaxed, you're only explosive where you need to be, trying to bring that, cultivate that, like seriously cultivate that self-control, um, learn how to adjust your intensity to other people you're rolling with, um, and just bring a little bit more of that maturity, I guess, to the younger, generation who we're kind of bringing up now. But study of human beings and their psychology, and it's been one of the most interesting things about my years on the mat.
Well, that's what I said this to somebody the other day, is that for me at least, the actual, like, for lack of a better term, the actual fighting is the least interesting thing happening to me. Like there's just so many different levels to it, even down to, like, when you're talking about the fighting, like this morning we were, trying to escape, like when somebody's got you in the seatbelt and trying to choke you, and just the difference between grabbing their hand versus grabbing their wrist. and like the physics of it. And it's just amazing. And for somebody listening who doesn't understand, like that doesn't sound like anything. It sounds like maybe it's a gimmick but like it's true. And it's amazing how well it works. But, and I feel like with all this stuff, in a way, it's like outdoor education in that you get instant feedback. So like you need to learn to calm down. Like you can meditate for years and but like when somebody has their chest on your face and you can't breathe, like you're either going to learn or you're not, you know, it's, it's just, and also I think starting as an older guy like me, I mean, I was 3 days before I turned 46 when I started. There's no chance I can ever win on athleticism or strength. And so I need to be focused on the other stuff, which is a blessing, I think, for me. All right. So say somebody walks in the gym, 35 years old, and a 35-year-old person who's interested. There's no judgment here from me about people who quit, but I'm just curious, like what makes in your mind, what are the personality traits or the kind of the prototype person that is going to get obsessed with it and be like, this is amazing and I don't want to do anything except this for a long time, versus the people that are like, I'm good, I'll go do something else. And again, I'm not talking trash about the person who chooses something else, but I'm curious, in all the people you've trained for coming up on 30 years of this, what's the personality type that sticks with or gets obsessed with it?
When I've just sort of casually canvassed people about, well, what brought you in? It's usually, I want to get in shape, or I miss some kind of, I was doing this activity and maybe I was climbing, or, for whatever reason, not doing that anymore as much. And I've heard this is really good physical, um, outlet and can get some cardio up. And so there's that. And then there's like the self-defense angle of things. So that's sort of what people come in for generally. What they stay for, I think, is the community, the culture, the technical aspect of like learning something new. People who are curious about the body, and its mechanics. People who are either consciously or unconsciously like working on their shit, whatever that is, through this physical practice. And people who enjoy people and learning about other people and like being around people who are a different tribe, so to speak, from a
Sure.
different,
Sure.
subculture, whatever, demographic. Um, People who do, there's no denying the endorphin kind of rush end of things. And just if you have a passion for fitness or you truly want to get and stay in shape, this can be an extremely good vehicle for that. Like a lot of people, myself included, like I weight train every week, but it's not
Mhm.
it's
How many
not
days
my
a week?
favorite. Twice a week, in
Okay.
addition to the training on the mat, and I do specific cardio training as well, in addition to the mat training. So at my age, I just feel it's really important. But so usually it's a combination of traits, I guess. People who are more interested in like the novelty of it, or who just, I don't know, want to be, you know, I don't know, any kind of like person who has wants to is obsessed with the power end of it, I guess. What I'm getting at, learning this to, yeah, who leans towards, a bully mentality. Like that's just not going to work. It's not going to work at our place. It's not going to work anywhere ultimately, because those people tend to self-destruct, and that's not good.
It's kind of incompatible with bullies,
Mm,
really. I mean, unless you're just a
right. And
savant.
I've seen some of those. I've seen people who are extremely technically gifted who are absolute assholes, and who seem to have no or very few morals or ethics, like about, uh, with power comes responsibility kind of thing.
Yeah, to make it through, you would have to be a world class bully and like have it so deep in you. Because I would think if you're kind of like 50th percentile bully, it's gonna work its way out of you by the time you get to purple belt, you know. I mean, you're gonna get checked hard enough, but you'd have to be an elite level bully to make it through all those ass whippings and still be a bully.
It is out there. I mean, people can learn at all phases in life, but I've dealt with people at black belt level who still have that, and they're, often younger guys. I'm not saying a lot, but I've come across it before, and it's just I have no time for it at all. That is, for people who aren't in the jiu-jitsu world, like that's definitely a minority of people. And if you're in a good school, that won't be tolerated, and you won't be around it.
Well, it's cool to be able to see some of these people, high level, like the two professors at my school, or they're both black belts, husband and wife duo, very, very, very smart, very, very, very technical. I think Dan, the husband, I mean, he works in tech project management during the day. I mean, like just very, very, very intellectual type folks. But if you Google them, you'll see MMA fights that they've been in, and these very calm, very kind, very gentle, caring people are in there in an MMA fight. And I really, something about that is so interesting to me with anybody, where you can have, you talked about it, I wouldn't say it's a shadow, because it's this skill, but somebody can have these two distinct sides of their personality that are both them, but could not be farther on the spectrum, at least when you're looking at it from afar. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like the fight game is
I don't
very
even know what the
interesting.
question is there, but it's just a curiosity.
I'm, clearly over my physical peak, which is not to say that we can't improve technically and physically, but as when you get into your 40s and 50s and beyond, training a super physical martial art like jiu-jitsu, you have to make adjustments. And there's reasons you don't see MMA fighters, I mean, even with all the performance enhancing stuff, like past their early 40s, that would be an outlier. You're pretty much done in your 30s. And but with jiu-jitsu, if you train smart, you can get a lot of physical, emotional, spiritual, social, emotion, all that stuff, benefits out of it, well into later life. So longevity has to be, that's what I tell guys who come in who are, in their 40s and 50s, and even, earlier. I try to get that message out to the young guys. My son is quite a quite a young stud, and he's 21. When he rolls with people, you can see everyone, loves rolling with him because he knows how to adjust to who he's training with. That's like a quote unquote old man skill. He's not just out there just destroying everybody with takedowns and like, violent submissions and whatever. So, I would we were talking about creatine earlier
Yeah.
before we got on, and that's a fantastic way to help build and maintain lean muscle mass. Strength training, you got to have a routine that works for you well, but we lose muscle mass as we age, and that's all kinds of detrimental effects from that. So the jiu-jitsu itself and additional strength training can help prevent injuries. Cardio, VO2 max, that stuff, very important. So yeah, longevity is like that is everything to me now. I'm not trying to I still do fine, at my age. I'm 30 years in, I'm a third degree, and but I also have to, this is the next phase in my learning, is like some degree of, accepting what I can and can't do. It is not easy, believe me, because I have a lot of years to remember back on, and where it was much easier to be the top dog when you're in your 20s and 30s, and you can, walk, like your injury recovery happens, in a couple days instead of now it's like weeks. But anyway, it's all part of the journey.
That's one of the things I really have loved about it is you mentioned the weight training, is that it's this one activity that I do 4 days a week, sometimes five, but very chill for the most part. And yet it has changed, like everything runs through the filter of jujitsu. Like at night now, like we're sitting there reading or, family time, and I'm stretching and I'm drinking 4 liters of water a day, and my diet, I've cleaned up my diet. I'm trying to like lean down a little bit, and like I've started lifting weights and doing more mobility stuff. And like I'm more flexible than I've ever been in my life. I'm still not close to flexible enough, but it is forcing me to do all these things that I should have been doing all along. And it's that instant feedback again. And some of it, I don't know if it's the right word, but it's fear. It's like, if I'm not flexible, I'm going to get hurt, and then I can't do this anymore. What another topic, kind of a big topic, but hopefully, I used to get in a few scraps in college with frat dudes which I'm not very proud of, but had to, for whatever reason, my testosterone, I couldn't control myself. But other than that, like, I have no desire to get in a fight with anybody, but I've always thought, like, with my family, from a self-defense standpoint, if, there's this kind of, almost like, I think of it as like a mousetrap being set. And like when we walk around downtown in this town, there's a big homeless problem around here, and people that are, I feel a great deal of compassion, because there's obviously mental health or substance abuse problems, but it used to be when we pass those kind of people, I would tense up and just be like waiting for something to happen. But ever since I started training jiu-jitsu, two things have happened. One, I have less of a desire to get in a physical altercation than I have in my entire life. I don't want anything to do with it after feeling the power of some of these. And then what it feels like. But then I've also relaxed. So like we passed somebody the other day yelling and screaming, and I noticed my hands were wide open. Like there was no part of me that was nervous. And because I knew, hopefully, nothing would happen, but if it did, I'm in a much better position than I've ever been in my entire life to deal with it and get away. And so, can you talk a bit about the self-defense part? And I never want to lead with that, because I don't want people to think, I think very few jiu-jitsu people walk in the streets looking for a fight, but it's like an insurance policy. Nobody wants to get in a fight, but if you do, it's nice to know what the hell you're doing,
Jiu-jitsu is a combat art, craft, sport, whatever, all those things. Jiu-jitsu evolved out of, the martial culture of Japan, and was essentially, my understanding of it is, if we're talking, 18th century and around that time, and if you lost your weapon, you were knocked off your horse, you had nothing, you could still have, there was, the last line of defense, you could strike, grapple, whatever. The jiu-jitsu we have today tends to focus on grappling, standing grappling, and ground grappling. The ground being the ideal place, because it's much easier. It's just from the control standpoint of controlling somebody. There's lots of, but that's kind of the simple, explanation of what jiu-jitsu is, I guess. And it's very closely, related to judo and other grappling arts, but it can be very effective for self-defense. Absolutely. There's no way to train for every eventuality, though. Multiple people, weapons, very common. Maybe the day you get attacked by somebody, you happen to have the flu. I'm getting over a cold right now. What if in your takedown attempt you slip on the ice? It's winter, and there's just so many things that can go wrong. And I think that what you're talking about, like, once you've done some training, it's like, man, you understand how strong the human body is and how fragile it is.
Yes.
And so I think that a lot of what, I just taught a women's self-defense class last month, and, one of the things at the beginning of that class that I was telling these ladies is that, a lot, if you train jiu-jitsu, that the physicality of it, I'm talking about if you're regularly training, your ability to deal with physicality, to be durable, to have a cardiovascular ability that is above average, to have, strength that is above average, to understand the basic positions, like, that's probably going to be enough under many circumstances for you to survive and escape a theoretical attack. If you're grabbed and brought to the ground, you will probably outlast that person. If you use your ability to recover guard to, strike in some positions to stand up again and get away. I'm not even saying like you're gonna, pull guard and you're gonna submit this person, sweep or get on top or whatever. I don't, that's not realistic. I'm telling them you'll be able to survive. Isn't that the ultimate purpose of this? I've rolled with
Yeah.
people who are extremely uh, physically gifted, shall we say, much bigger than me, much younger than me, maybe close to my technical ability. But if I can wear them out, and that takes a while, and that's a skill in itself. And I get up and walk away. There was no submission, there was no tap, but they're gassed out and on their back, and I get up and walk away after that round. That to me is, quote unquote, a win.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
so anyway, but it does take dedicated training. It's like there's no free lunch here. Um, you got to put in the dirt time and you got to maintain it. And jiu-jitsu is really hard, like you understand. And taking long breaks like that, boy, there's almost nothing worse. I mean, after if you take a couple of months off and come back, oof, I I pity folks that do that, and that's pretty common, to be honest.
Yeah, I can't take time off because I find that it's a very odd thing because I'm obviously obsessed with it, but I found it's almost like the momentum goes both ways. Like when I'm doing it 4 days a week or five, sometimes five, it's easy to go. It's easy to go. But like the other day, we were on a family trip and I missed a few days, and when it came time to go back, I didn't want to go. I was like, man, I don't want to do. I don't want to. And it was almost like I don't know. It's like the momentum swings both ways, at least for me. But I don't know. And from speaking of the self defense and the fighting, the actual real fighting, I've started doing a little bit of Muay Thai that they offer it there, just really just for fun and to mix it up. But the coach was a professional MMA fighter, almost made it to UFC, and when you stand next to a guy, and I'm probably 6 inches taller than him, but when you stand next to a guy who knows how to use his body like that, and you see him just come at you, not even trying to hurt, but just you see what he's capable of doing. I've never had that experience. Like it's like a life changing experience. It reminded me of like I thought I knew what a fast car was, and then you go sit on the front row at a NASCAR race, and you're like, oh, okay, this is different. I mean, it's just like that guy could kill me in 15 seconds with his bare hands. And I never knew that was an option. I always thought I'm big. I'm 6'2", 190 pounds, probably 200 pounds now. I can handle myself if I get mad enough. Wait,
Well, yeah, it depends it depends who's standing in front of you. You realize like there's no sure things. There's just too many variables. That guy, highly skilled, same thing could happen to him. He could be standing in
sure,
front of some homeless
sure.
homeless guy who, sticks a knife between his ribs or something. You don't
Exactly.
know.
Exactly.
The That's that humility. Like if you think you're already at a disadvantage if you think I can wreck this person. Like you
Yeah.
you can't think that. You have to think this I need to end this by either submitting this person, controlling them, or getting away. That's it. And I'm talking self-defense or in the gym. That's how you should train in the gym as well, right? The object is just to deal with the problem in front of you. You don't know what the outcome is going to be, but you're going to do everything in your control to stay ahead, to stay in position, and to submit, control, or escape. What else is there? Your anger will only set you back.
Oh, sure. Well, I like a lot of guys like me, my age, and I listened to a bunch of Jocko Willink podcasts, and he talks about self defense, and he goes, "Your self defense is runaway." And if that should be the number one thing all the time, run away. The only time if they grab you and you can't run
That's
away,
right.
that's
And I would
jujitsu.
say,
But
I would even add something else to that. I would say your defense isn't to run away. Like before that, you can avoid most things.
Correct.
And
Yep.
that is another thing that jiu-jitsu will give you. You will have the ability to read people, to feel things. I know it's a little esoteric, but your awareness of people and their intention will become much more elevated if you've been in, you're training, you're sparring regularly. I guarantee that will become, and that's where that confidence will come from. You know what? I'm just not going to walk down that street tonight. Just something just doesn't feel right. Something about this guy at the end of the bar, whatever. It's not worth it. I'm not going to have a stare down with him. I'm not going to. It isn't worth it. And that ego thing. I don't know if you read the book, The Gift of Fear by Matt Thornton,
That was the next question I was going to have.
whereas
No,
men
that was I
are
was going
more
to talk
afraid of
about.
being humiliated, and women are more afraid of being hurt or killed or something like that. Maybe I'm getting that
Yep.
wrong, but the men and humiliation thing that does appear in that book, and it's like that's your ego talking. Um, so get over it. Like, yeah, there's just a lot of places to go with that, but I think that real self mastery involves all of this stuff. Yes, you should be physically competent. I'm talking kind of self defense right now. Yes, you should be physically fit, and you should be able to just walk away from things and just avoid them in the first place, run away if necessary. Um, but then that should not be interpreted as like cowardice or whatever. It's just that's nonsense. The object is to, you know, survive. And if you have to protect yourself or your family, but obviously, and then turn it up to 11 when you do it.
I would guess, tell me if you disagree with this, but I would say 99 times out of 100, if not 999 out of 1,000, people that want to fight don't know how to fight.
Yeah, there's some of
Do
that,
you
or
think
they
that's
or they
right?
know
Like
just enough to get themselves into trouble.
yeah. They've
Yeah.
done
And
a
there's
few
some of that
classes
out there
somewhere.
for sure. Yeah, I don't know how you could measure that, but it does kind of intuitively seem like that sometimes. But I've also because you never know. You
You
never
never know.
knew. Maybe it is some kid who just doesn't know how to fight, but he's got a 9 millimeter on him. Okay. So do you really want to go there? There's people, there's high level black belts, jiu-jitsu people, MMA fighters, it's well known who have gotten killed because they got shot or jumped or they let the person up, showing them mercy and then they turned around and killed them kind of thing. I mean, it's very, very dark stuff. So something that needs to be understood, like really, you know, uh, with humility and like realistically, like what are we capable of? But you only find that out after you train hard and really understand it. Like a lot of people have come in over the years, tried jujitsu and left and a lot of that is quote unquote ego. They don't like being dominated. They don't like getting tapped. They don't like feeling powerless. And if you can't get over that, then that's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know that better than anybody because I spent a year just getting whipped and whipped. And I don't know. I think losing ego is always a good thing, at least the way I think about it.
When you have your own students who you are bringing up from nothing, nipping at your heels or crushing you,
Yeah.
imagine how that feels, right? You're supposed to be the top dog in the room. Um, that's humility. Like that's hard. And to be in a spot where, yeah, like you're a middle-aged guy. It's like you can't just muscle out of things as much. You can't out cardio some people. Yeah, the humility factory is a is a real place. And, I never yeah, I try just to walk in there every day with just a positive mindset and being there for people and being kind to myself too. Like some days you're the hammer, some days you're the nail.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you are the nail, at least for me, finding those small victories, like, well, I did a better job escaping from that, or I kept my breathing under control versus this whole thing. Like I gotta get them in armbar or whatever. You're like that, just no, we're just going to focus on getting, just today I'm just going to focus on my breathing, try to breathe out
And
of my
isn't
mouth.
that a good
Um,
life lesson too? It's like
It is. There, I mean, it's one of a million life
being
lessons.
grateful for just having, gratitude for small victories. Like that you have to look at it that way. If you're going to do something like a lifetime pursuit like this.
It's the only thing I've found that doesn't end. Like I've always been very goal focused. Like I'm going to run this race, or I'm going to climb this mountain, and I go hard, and it's all in on this one day. But this thing is the first thing that I'm never gonna, I'm never gonna win. I'm never gonna. There is no end. The only goal is to keep doing it.
I mean, even if you try, like there's so many techniques, like styles like that I've experimented with and learned over the years that I have forgotten. And like I'll see them on social media or something. Oh, I used to do that like forever ago. And why did where did it go? I don't know. You can't contain it all in your body and in your brain. It's that infinite quality is very, very alluring.
It is, and it's so different. I mean, I wouldn't have thought on the surface. I would have thought that would not work with my personality, but it's in some ways. I'm glad I didn't discover this when I was 22 because I think I wouldn't have done anything else.
That's a real thing.
It may have just taken
About
over,
problem solving too. Like if you have a brain that likes to solve problems, there's just so many levels to it. People don't who are outside of it don't understand. I mean, problem solving, especially for men, is like very, very important of how our brains work. And also like being in an environment that where you are encouraged to be appropriately aggressive, like that part of our masculinity, that's very important. To not be shamed for that, very important. That is still mostly male dominated. We do have some ladies in our academy, and there's a lot of women do train, but it still is and probably always will be mostly a male pursuit. But one thing I'll talk about is the sort of peaks and valleys over the long haul. How long have you been training now?
If you add it all up, I'm probably right at a year. Because I got a small injury that I had to take time off for, but it's probably been like 15 months total.
So once you get to that sort of blue belt level, which at our academy, that can be anywhere from a year and a half to 2 years, typically, if someone is training a
Yeah.
lot. I don't know if you've heard of the phenomenon called blue belt blues. You
I
have.
have, yes.
So for people who aren't familiar, the standard adult ranking system is white belt, blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, black belt, and then there's different degrees of black belt and stuff. And it generally takes about 10 plus years to get to black belt. Um, but that blue belt kind of zone is a very interesting kind of psychological mile marker. You feel like, you want that as a white belt, like you're training a lot, you're having success, you're part of this group of people who are, all in this, doing this difficult thing together, and you're seeing their successes and failures. And, the day finally comes. We have a testing culture at our school. So we, um, twice a year, January and June, do our adult belt testing typically. And people have been working on this test for, a couple months and get it. And then sort of the floor drops out. It's like this thing you've worked so hard for. You typically are suffering some imposter syndrome. You feel like you don't deserve it. You feel like it took so long to get here and there's still so far to go. Like to the next belt, 5 years to purple belt, roughly 8 years to brown. But oh man. And so that can be very destabilizing for people. And what I've seen is people sometimes they give it up. Sometimes they drop out and go to another academy looking for something. I don't know what, but maybe they're just not feeling like I don't know. I think it's a restlessness that happens around that phase that is kind of where we tend to lose people who have been doing it for a while, but they get that blue belt and then that's it. Um, because now you realize, how much you put in, how much more there is to put in, how much longer you're going to be in this. So if you can't accept that this is a lifetime pursuit and just be okay with that, you're going to have a rough time.
I try my best not to think about belts, stripes, whatever, because like in my mind, it's like I just want to keep doing it. The goal is to keep doing it. The goal is to keep doing it. But as I keep putting in my time and keep getting more stripes on the white belt, I'm like, you can't help but start thinking about that. But it's I feel like I've been there enough in other activities, like I'll train really like when I was in my 30s, I climbed Denali in Alaska, and it took me two years to do it. Like there was this chaos on the first year. I had to go back, and then like you get down and you've summited it and you're done. This 2 year journey is over, and you're like, yeah, and I'm still right here. And what? So what? Like I've learned the hard way. Yeah, not like it's just me here again, and so it's hopefully I'll be prepared if I ever do get to that point where the color of the belt starts changing. Like it won't. I just want to keep going. And so if I start faltering, you got to call me out and be like, "Hey, you said you got to keep."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's this weird. The belt structure is very interesting because it does. We always tell people, we always tell people, don't think too much about the belt. Just kind of keep training. Well, that's true, and the belts do mean something, and they're very psychologically and culturally important. There's no way to, um, from school to school, even within a school, you know, people who are wearing the same belt, a bunch of blue belts, there are people within that group who are going to be more athletic, who are more technical, who are whatever, more and less. You have to look at, a bunch of factors like commitment to the art, you know, effort and attitude, yes, technique and skill, all of these things. It's people get hung. You get in these two camps of like it either means nothing or it means everything. And the fact is, it means something, but not everything. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? You have to just keep it
yeah,
in
yeah,
perspective. It's a good marker of commitment and time and a level of mastery, whatever rank you're at, definitely. But just don't obsess about it. Um, so yeah, that's basically my advice to people. It's like you can't. I kind of have had enough of people who say, "Oh, the belts don't mean shit," or um, of that mindset because these things do matter to us. We need to be recognized for our time and suffering, commitment, investment in life. And
oh yeah.
and so yeah, you walk up to someone who's got a brown belt on or whatever, and it's like that person's been training hard for a long time. We have a pretty conservative in most schools uh, promotion structure, 2 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, and it can vary somewhat, of course, but you're not going to black belt in 2 years. That's just unacceptable. And so anyway, that's my take on that. I think you seem to have a good attitude about it. It's like, yep, they're going to come.
I'm
Yep, the
trying.
recognition will come, and that helps you, in a positive way. Like once you get that belt, yeah, this something is moving forward. There is improvement in all these different areas.
Yeah, I try not to think about it, but like you can't help, but I can't help but my mind, think about go towards that, and I mean if it ever does work out, like I really do think if that ever just to blue belt, like that would be one of the most proud things I've ever done.
Yeah, because there's no question. Yeah, you earn that thing, right? In a good school. It's like you put in the dirt time.
So many life lessons again. I got two more questions for you. You've mentioned a few books. Are any martial arts related books that you would recommend that not just for people who are doing martial arts, but maybe books that, have larger lessons that people who have no interest in martial arts would like, could read and get something out of, or just books that have played an important role in your life. I'm just always looking for good book recommendations from smart people.
Yeah. Well, I told you I picked up the Meditations again recently, Marcus Aurelius, which is not a book you can just read straight through. It's yeah, pick it up, read a bit, put it down, and then you'll think about that for a week and then do it again. That sort of has some martial themes of self-mastery. There's a book I read recently called Bad Therapy by Abigail Schreier. Are you familiar with that one?
I heard her on a podcast and I was obsessed with that for quite a while. And my wife and I talked about it. Like that was a big topic of discussion here in this house. I've not read the book.
I would highly recommend it. It's ostensibly, it's called Bad Therapy, why kids aren't growing up. I think that's the subtitle. So it's sort of about on the I don't know, kind of on the surface about how this overdiagnoses of um, conditions that we're putting on kids and kind of keeping them from being healthy. Essentially, this kind of the gist of it, but it really says more about parenting for one thing, and about therapy. And as someone who's done my share of therapy, been in my share of therapy, I thought it was very, very useful. One of her ideas is that talking about your problems can not always, but can lead to rumination, which is almost the definition of depression, for example. And what's
Yes.
hilarious is that there was a study that came out like pretty recently about it was this something about patients being taught to suppress thoughts, tend to have better psychological outcomes. So, kind of this
Mhm.
idea that
Yeah.
maybe you're actually doing pretty well, kind of taking this idea that yes, there's a time for therapy. Yes, there's a time to look at and address your problems. There's also a time to stop doing that and to let it go and give gratitude for what you have and consider what our ancestors have been through. Like really think about that. Learn something about history and human suffering and how easy we have it now. And maybe your messed up childhood wasn't that bad. At the very least, it was hard, but it was something you are capable of surviving it. You are resilient, that sort of messaging. And that really, I did not expect to be uh, as impressed by that book as I was. Same thing, saw her on a podcast, eventually got the book, I listened to it, and I was just like, oh, dude, this is amazing. So she's really onto something. And again, not to say there's no place for therapy, but it should be uh, taken in context, and none of us should be encouraged to be an endless patient. If your
Yeah.
therapist isn't saying occasionally, "Have you considered, wrapping this up?" Then because almost none of mine ever had, and that should tell you something about the model, right? Maybe you're
I
actually
agree.
doing pretty well. Maybe they want to see people, and not to demonize the profession or anything, but imagine you're a therapist. Would you rather deal with like the schizophrenic patient or just the easy someone with like mild to moderate depression and anxiety every week for 5 years?
Sure.
Well, it kind of
Yeah.
kind of makes sense to try to keep that person coming back. So again, I've done my share of it. I've thought a lot about therapy, done a lot of self work. It certainly has its place, but it also I think it's just really important to understand how resilient people are and to not feed our neuroses and to feed our rumination and anxiety. And once again, jujitsu, right? Boom. What could be better? Exercise generally, jujitsu specifically, because it gives you the physical, the mental, emotional, the social connections you need. Um, it checks off so many boxes of like human health that and it'll give you perspective on other people's lives, right? It's like I've got students who are combat veterans. Yeah, you want some perspective on on your life? Talk to someone who's been in war, and that leads to gratitude, and gratitude, can make us better people.
Have you read Tribe? Have you read Tribe by
I
Sebastian
have, yeah.
Younger?
It's been a few years now, but I did read that one.
I think that's one of the most important books
Hmm.
ever. And it plays right into all this, community and purpose, and that we need it as humans and we don't get it because of the way society's set up. And I really do think jujitsu is a very, very, very quick path to finding community and purpose. I think the same thing about the counseling and the therapy, and I mean, I've been down that road, very, very, very deep. And I mean, I really will say that I think my experience with jujitsu has really kind of unlocked something in me that has made a lot of that much less necessary than it
Isn't
used to
that
be,
wild?
which is it's very wild. It was something I never expected, and it just kind of organically happened. And it was the kind you just all of a sudden I didn't need to be talking about all that stuff as much.
It's like the Zen saying, chop wood, carry water, right? Something about working with your hands, with your body, something physical, a physical craft. I do some carving. I have some physical things I like to do outside of jiu-jitsu that kind of touch on the same thing. It's like dealing with physical reality and understanding like it has structure and laws and that you need to work with. Like you can't just pretend they're not there. I think that pulls you out of that super theoretical um, therapy speak, you know, like mindset in a way that other things can't. Like we're not good at a lot of times top down thinking. I mean, meditation is wonderful and great and it has its place and everything, but sometimes you just need, if you have anxiety, just to get out there on the mat and sweat it out or walk up the mountain and, get
Yep.
physical with it. Um, we were physical beings, and it really changes people. We're very theoretical, we sit in front of screens, we fill up our heads full of ideas and, um, many of them are not good for us. And so sometimes it's good to step away from that and just get back to sort of that primal reality that we're animals. We have these, there's a lot to us, but we do have an aggressive side that needs to be addressed, especially men. And dealing with that in a healthy way is good for everybody.
My wife benefits more than anybody because I'm much more steady. She's the one that has to deal with me. What did I miss? Any parting words? I mean, we seriously, man, are you going to be at Old Salt this year?
I'll try to get over there. Yeah. Yep.
Well, I'm not joking, man. Like I would love to come to Helena while I'm out there and just, I mean, you give y'all a grappling dummy to throw around, but I would love to join you there and see everything. Cause Hal just speaks so highly of you and it's weird. Yeah. I mean, it seems like you've built an amazing culture there. You're helping so many people. And so I would love to figure out a way to stop by at some point, but we can talk about that later. In the meantime, any parting words from you to kind of wrap this up?
Well, it was a pleasure to speak with you. I wasn't sure. I know it's largely a conservation kind of podcast. We didn't get into really any of that. Um, we can do that another time, maybe.
Yes.
Um,
Part 2 and 3 would
right.
be that.
I haven't shared those thoughts much recently with folks, and I really appreciate you getting it out there. I think Jiu-Jitsu is a very positive force in the world. I mean, it can be. It's not. Nothing is perfect. But I think done well, this practice can really help a lot of people become better people and just become healthier. And that's really what it's about for me. Uh, give it a shot wherever you are, wherever you're listening. Go take a class, do hard things. It's important to do hard things. Many of our problems today, I think, are a result of all of these forces that are keeping us sedentary, or keeping us eating bad food, feeling like we're victims, you know. So this will help empower you. I really do believe that. I've seen it a million times. Um, there's no magic bullet in this life, but if you put in the work, it's a tool that can definitely help you be more adaptive and be more develop a more of a growth mindset.
Well, you're the man. I really appreciate this conversation. I've loved it. And it's a conversation I've been wanting to have for going on 15 months now, to just kind of unload all my pent up thoughts on this. And I hope we have many, many more conversations, but thanks for everything you do.
Thank you, Ed. I really appreciate it.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I know your time is valuable, so it means the world that you spend it listening. If you want to support the podcast and help it to continue to spread and grow, there are a few ways you can help. Number one, pass it along to a friend or share it on social media. Word of mouth recommendations are the most powerful way for ideas to spread, so I'd love it if you could share the podcast with a few pals who might enjoy it. Number 2, you can go to Apple Podcasts and give it a 5-star review. Good reviews encourage the Apple overlords to suggest the podcast to others. So there's a link in the notes if you'd be so kind as to give it 5 stars. Number 3, you can support the podcast financially via Patreon, and there are exclusive benefits for those who do, including a monthly behind-the-scenes newsletter, Mountain and Prairie stickers, live and recorded video chats with podcast guests, and much more. Number 4, I've also got 2 emails that I send out. The first is my weekly email called Good News from the American West, which I send out every Wednesday. It's only positive news, something we can all use a little more of these days. And my other email is my bi-monthly book recommendations email. One email every other month with 5, 6, 7, or 8 books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The thousands of people on both of these lists will vouch for me. No spam or other funny business. And number 5, finally, check out my online store for Mountain and Prairie stickers, shirts, and coffee mugs. I've got some really cool designs from Western artists with more on the way, so head to mountainandprairie.com/shop to check it all out. I'd love to connect with you. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, so look me up on either of those platforms by my name or through the links on my website. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for your support.